Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
Stolen valor garbage? Ooh, JD Vance is making a huge mistake by trying to swiftboat Tim Walz over his military record. That is a very bad idea. Falsely attacking Tim Walz for his 24 years of military service when Donald Trump cowardly claimed that he had bone spurs so he could dodge the Vietnam draft is not a great look.
I had a foot thing and I had deferment for that.
Despite the fact Trump had been active in various sports, including basketball and baseball. According to Selective Service records obtained by CNN, Trump had been out of school for 18 months before the lottery even began.
Awkward. But don't worry, Trump eventually fought in Vietnam. Sorry, I meant Trump compared avoiding STDs to going to battle in Vietnam.
I can't even believe it. I've been so lucky,
right,
in terms of that whole world.
You've never gotten a social disease.
It is a dangerous world out there.
It is
scary. It's like Vietnam, sort of like, you know, the Vietnam era.
It is your personal Vietnam, isn't it?
It is my personal
It is. You've said that many
times. I feel
times.
like a great and very brave soldier.
But did Donald Trump actually avoid them, though? Because based on his mental decline and recent unhinged Mar-a-Lago presser, you might think the convicted felon suffered from untreated syphilis.
And I've spoken to the biggest crowds. Nobody's spoken to crowds bigger than me. If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington. And you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people.
Look, I'm no doctor, but I've been saying that Trump has had neurosyphilis since 2017. Anyway, in a desperate attempt to fight the massive fundraising from the Harris-Walz campaign and Trump's decline in the polls, the GOP decided to revive their old swift-boating tactic. You might recall that Trump's senior advisor, Chris LaCivita, used this tactic back in 2004 to falsely attack John Kerry's Vietnam War record, which is ironic given that Trump dodged the Vietnam draft 5 times. The Swiftboat group was caught lying and later fined $300,000 for not properly reporting their donors and spending, which violated campaign finance laws. Even Matthew Dowd, the chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 campaign, said that these were lies. He also said that Vance and the GOP attacks on Walz's military service with Trump as their cult leader is a Monty Python skit. They attack jaywalkers for breaking the law while they escort their mob boss to a meal celebrating their latest scam. So now, LaCivita is back to pushing another Swiftboat attack, but this time against Walz's military record to paint him as anti-American, which is hilarious since Tim Walz is as American as apple pie. He's a family man, former football coach, avid hunter, a high school teacher from a distinctly rural background, and served 24 years in the National Guard.
This guy is all about community, he's all about family, he's all about doing the right thing, and he's been the most consistent person that I've known in my time in public service, and I've known him over a decade, and I think he's the perfect contrast to perhaps one of the biggest frauds to ever hit the scene, JD Vance. I mean, who knows what that guy really believes or who that guy really is at his core. He's been so many different things, and he's just become a Trump lover in his most latest incarnation. Tim Walz is Tim Walz, and Tim Walz is all about serving the people around him in the Guard as a high school teacher, a member of Congress, a governor, and yes, now as the next vice president of the United States of America.
JD Vance could have spent the whole campaign focusing on issues and policies, but instead, he's busy creepily stalking Harris on an airport tarmac and attacking a fellow veteran's military service, revealing exactly who he is and why Trump hired him, to be his attack dog. It's the same reason that Trump had Vivek Ramaswamy attack Republicans during the 2024 primary debates, allowing Trump to go after his opponents without ever getting his hands dirty. Trump is even using Vance to go after Harris for being biracial, which is ironic given that Vance has biracial children. And as we saw at the National Association of Black Journalists, Trump's racist attack failed miserably.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she went She became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is...
I think somebody should look into that, too, when you ask, continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
Donald Trump said something very simple, totally inoffensive, but frankly, obviously true to me.
Indian and black, how can she fake her race?
She fakes who she is depending on the audience that she's in front of.
Vance overplayed his hand bigly because the only thing that will make veterans more upset than actual stolen valor is falsely accusing a fellow veteran of 24 years of stolen valor. But leave it to the Republican weirdos to open up Pandora's box by falsely accusing Walz of stolen valor and claiming he abandoned his unit.
Walz actually filed paperwork to run for Congress in February of 2005. The next month, the Guard announced a possible deployment to Iraq within 2 years. Walz then announced he intended to stay in the race, quote, whether that is in Washington, D.C. or in Iraq. He retired from his Guards unit in May of 2005. He was deployed with the Minnesota National Guard in August of 2003 to Italy in a supporting role for the war in Afghanistan. While there, he did not see combat. But now, Vance is also accusing Walz of falsely claiming he did serve in a combat zone. That claim comes from this clip of Walz talking about gun control.
We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
A Harris campaign spokesperson is responding to the accusation this evening, saying, quote, in his 24 years of service, the governor carried, fired, and trained others to use weapons of war innumerable times.
And this claim that Walz is using a rank that he didn't attain and that's stolen valor is bullshit. Even the Minnesota National Guard says it's bullshit. They confirm that Walz served as a command sergeant major, and the National Guard emphasized this in public statements. Republicans are deliberately lying about Walz, and do you want to know how I know? Well, a man who served with Walz for 10 years and doesn't even agree with him or support him politically is defending him against these attacks.
Yeah, I spoke with Joe Eustace, who served for over 10 years with Governor Walz in the Minnesota Army National Guard. And he's a really interesting person to talk to about this because he does not see eye to eye with Walz on politics at all. In fact, I want to read something from him. He said, from what I know of the situation, they're lying. He says, speaking of those who have come out against Walz from their former battalion, he says, Walz was a good soldier, as good of a soldier as you'll find. I'm not trying to defend him. I hope people don't think that. What I'm trying to do is defend someone who served his country. I'm not voting for him. I'll campaign against him, but I don't think it's fair to characterize his service the way they have. Specifically, it's that point that is being made where he says they say that he retired so he didn't have to go to Iraq, and he says that they are lying about that. That is Joe Eustace's words there. He says, in fact, that Walz was thinking about retiring long before that because he was thinking about running for office. And he says that in a conversation, Joe Eustace says he pointed out to Walz, well, other people have been in Congress or been in office and they've been in the National Guard, but he said that Walz said something to the effect of, yeah, but they get let out of, deployments or assignments, and that looks bad. And Walz didn't want to have that appearance.
As I mentioned before, the Trump campaign is making a huge mistake by attacking a veteran, but it's the only tactic that Republicans seem to know.
Governor Ventura, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm really eager to hear your take on this because you are a former Navy SEAL. You served in Vietnam, and I have to ask you what you think of this attack from the Trump-Vance ticket on Governor Walz's military service.
Well, Laura, I'll tell you what I think. I think it's shameful. I think it's shameful that a veteran would attack another veteran. Governor Walz served honorably for 24 years in the National Guard. After 20 years, you are eligible to retire at any time you deem necessary. They talk about him missing his deployment. Well, maybe Mr. Vance should ask the real question. What is the National Guard doing deploying to a foreign country in a foreign war? Well, let's go into history and figure out how that happened. That happened because George W. Bush and Dick Cheney went into the Iraq War based on lies, no weapons of mass destruction, no ties to Al-Qaeda, nothing with 9/11, and they ran out of bodies. They needed more bodies. They couldn't implement a draft. That would be political suicide. So what George Bush did was sign an executive order sending the National Guard into foreign deployment. The National Guard is not for foreign deployment. They're name says what they do. They guard our nation from within.
This is the Republican Party. They made their bed and now they're gonna have to lie in it. And speaking of beds, I want to thank today's sponsor, Miracle Made. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? It can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses, and it's just gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning antibacterial bedding, such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth and require up to 3 times less laundry. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice if not nicer than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/Gabe to try Miracle Sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo Gabe at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Gabe and use the code Gabe to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Gabe to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Republicans already tried this against Walz when he ran for Congress in 2006 and again for governor in 2018, and both times it failed because it was based on lies. It is appalling how Republican military members attack Democrats acting as if they're the only ones worthy of patriotic service. These are the same people who swore to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, but then they also cheered on the January 6 rioters, some of whom even stormed the Capitol. You will never see them criticize fellow Republicans like MAGA moron J.R. Majewski, who actually lied about his military record, or even Tom Cotton bragging about being an Army Ranger when he was not. So the last person who should ever be calling into question someone else's service and whether you actually served your country if you were never actually shot at is MAGA Republican J.D. Vance. If you weren't aware, Trump's sofa-loving VP was a combat correspondent, which would make you think that he saw combat, but not so fast. Vance was actually a public affairs specialist, which means he sat in an air-conditioned office for 6 months while deployed in Iraq and wrote about the war, safely behind a desk. Vance even admitted to it in his fake memoir, Hillbilly Elegy.
I was lucky to escape any real fighting.
And he wrote about his service in an article on military.com. I was lucky to escape any real fighting. As a public affairs Marine, I would attach to different units to get a sense of their daily routine. Generally, I take photos or write short stories about individual Marines or their work. And when challenged on whether he should be the one to question another person's military experience, he got defensive.
You fought in Iraq? I served in a combat zone. I never said that I saw a firefight myself.
Before Vance and the Trump campaign decided to denigrate veterans, everyone accepted and thanked him for his military service. J.D. Vance served this country, just like Tim Walz, and we are grateful for everyone who did. But Vance knows Walz's military record, which makes this type of attack not only disgusting, but an insult to veterans everywhere. Here's former Pennsylvania Representative Patrick Murphy and Walz's roommate while they were in Congress.
You're also a veteran. When you see these claims from Vance that the governor somehow has what he called stolen valor, that he's lied about his military service, what's your response to these kinds of attacks?
It's heartbreaking, Laura, to be honest with you. And it's really disappointing that Senator Vance has done that. I mean, Tim Walz has given 24 years of his service to our country in uniform, 24 years. And when our nation asked Sergeant Major Walz to deploy for Operation Enduring Freedom, he went overseas. That means he left his job. He left his wife and young kids. He went overseas and served where the Army told him. And it wasn't in Afghanistan. It was in Italy, but that's where his unit was. His artillery unit from Minnesota, the Minnesota National Guard. So for Senator Vance to do this, it's really disheartening. You know, when he was announced, you know, there's a lot of us veterans. You know, I'm a proud Democrat. You know, I didn't attack his military service. That's not what you do to your brother and sister veterans.
It really shows you what the GOP thinks of the military. I mean, beyond their general apathy towards veterans and supporting and passing meaningful legislation. Excuse me, the PACT Act. And no one hates our military more than the guy J.D. Vance is running with. Donald Trump. This is the same draft dodger who called Americans who died in war losers and suckers. Trump's own former Chief of Staff General John Kelly has gone on the record saying this and much more.
What can I add that has not already been said? Calling President Trump, quote, a person that has no idea what America stands for and has no idea what America is all about. For the first time ever, Kelly sets the record straight with on-the-record confirmation of a number of damning details about Donald Trump from background sources, including from a 2020 Atlantic story reported with unnamed sources by Editor-in-Chief Jeffrey Goldberg, including the stunning detail that Trump turned to Kelly on Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery in 2017 and asked, I don't get it. What was in it for them? This is Kelly confirming on the record stories of Trump insulting Senator John McCain and former President George H.W. Bush because in Vietnam and in World War II, respectively, the former aviators were shot down. Kelly describes Trump as, quote, a person that thinks those who defend their country in uniform or are shot down or seriously wounded in combat or spend years being tortured as POWs are all, quote, suckers because, quote, there is nothing in it for them. A person that did not want to be seen in the presence of military amputees because, quote, it doesn't look good for me. A person that demonstrated open contempt for a Gold Star family, for all Gold Star families, on TV during the 2016 campaign. And rants that our most precious heroes who gave their lives in America's defense are, quote, losers and wouldn't visit their graves in France.
And who could forget how he attacked John McCain for being a POW?
I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, you know, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you agree with that?
He's a war hero because he was captured.
Trump is not a friend of the military or veterans, and neither is J.D. Vance. Trump has mocked them, privatized millions in veterans' healthcare, and caused VA budget cuts. In contrast, Biden constantly honors military service, supported veterans in union negotiations, and championed the PACT Act, which expands VA healthcare and benefits for those exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxic substances. Go ahead and guess which political party either didn't support the bill or went back on their word to kill the bill. That's right, Republicans. And now, with their recent pathetic attack against Walz, it really shows you what they think of our military.
Nada, zero, zilch.
Another dumb move by the Trump campaign and the GOP, but hey, what do you expect? They aren't exactly known for their intelligence. Well, that's all for me today. Thanks so much for watching, and feel free to follow me at I Am Gabe Sanchez. What Was That is made possible by viewers like you. And if you'd like to support the show and help us grow, you can contribute to my Patreon at patreon.com/IamGabeSanchez. Thank you for your support. So until next episode, I'm Gabe Sanchez, and this has been What Was That?